The phone call came in. It was a friend who is serving in a church as a layman. And the comment was, I've heard before, we are having trouble finding a pastor. Boy, have I heard that so many times. It seems like so many more times lately. Now, Sam and I at our other podcast, Rain on Leadership, we've talked about the impending and the growing shortage of pastors just in general. I'm going to approach this issue from a different perspective. And I'm going to talk about the fact that many churches get their pastors through a process called a pastor search committee. It used to be called pulpit committee, now pastor search. Now, I understand some of you are in churches where appointments take place. Some of you are in churches where it's not a committee that brings about the pastor search. I get that. But I'm going to talk specifically about the pastor search process where it's not an appointment, where a group is recommending a pastor to the congregation. So regardless of your polity, I hope that you will stay tuned for this because there's some good points that can be made regardless of how you bring pastors in. Once again, the Church Answers podcast, once again, sponsored by Cheney & Associates, the accounting firm for the church. Just a reminder, they're already serving over 1,100 churches with accounting and payroll. They've been around for over 2 decades. They serve small churches, church plants, medium-sized, large-sized, mega churches. They serve them all, and they serve them well. Reach out to our friends at Cheney & Associates. You can see the link in the show notes, or you can just Google Cheney & Associates. And if you want to, you can go CheneyAssociates.com. There's all these kind of ways to reach them. You can right now go to our friends at Cheney & Associates. Let's go to this question. Is your church pastor search process working? The evidence is no, it's not. Part of the evidence is we're hearing from search committees. Can you help us find a pastor? Wish I had a nickel for every time someone asked me that question. Why can't we get a pastor? Why do these candidates not seem to work out? Why is it taking us so long? Those are some of the things we hear and some of the questions that we're asked. And I've tried to dissect this and to figure it out because it used to be as a fairly efficient process. You'd form a committee, they'd get resumes, they'd go through the resumes, they'd pick 2 or 3, they'd interview them, they'd pick the one of the 3 that worked well, and they liked the best, and they present them to the church. They'd probably go here and preach somewhere. It was a typical process. I served on one pastor search committee when I was in the business world, and that's pretty much how it worked. We ended up getting the pastor through that process, and it was fairly efficient. Not so much anymore. What's taking place? Why are pastor search processes not working? Well, one of the reasons is denominational networks are not as effective as they once were. Denominations are not as unified as they once were. And I'm speaking in general. There are exceptions to this. But they're torn apart in just so many different ways. And because of that, the connections where denominational leaders could recommend someone, almost an appointment, quasi-appointment process. Here's my one to recommend for this church or this church. And that's just not nearly as pervasive nor as effective as it used to be. As denominational structures begin to break down, as denominations begin to decline, the denominational source of providing recommendations for a pastor are obviously decreasing. And so the denominational network is not as effective as it used to be. This is one of the reasons why pastor search firms, and there's several good ones that are out there today, pastor search firms became more useful to the churches because the normal way of finding a pastor was not being effective. And so you had to go and find someone who does nothing but search. And as a result, many pastor search firms began to rise up during this time. So one of the reasons is that the denominational networks have broken down. Now, here's kind of a related reason to that. Non-denominational churches are some of the fastest growing churches. And so they don't have the network of pastors. They don't have a denominational network. And even these healthy churches are having difficulty finding pastors. Second reason, submitted resumes are not necessarily the best candidates. If you go through this process where you seek resumes and you go through a pile of resumes, I'm going to tell you, you're going to probably waste a lot of time. Many times the resumes that you get are not the type of fits for your church. They are, I could go into many reasons why. I'm not suggesting that every resume that you get is the wrong person, but I'm going to say most of them are. And many pastor search committees, or whatever the group is called, spend an inordinate amount of time going through resumes when most of the resumes aren't going to be a fit anyway. Just hear me well on this. Submitted resumes often aren't your best candidates. That's why we lean toward recommendations of people that you trust more than just resumes showing up and you put them in a pile and you take weeks to go through them. A third reason that pastor search committees are not working is the people on pastor search committees don't do this full time. Many have never done it at all. They cannot put the time into it that, say, an appointment process can or a pastor search firm can. So they go slowly. And if they're going through resumes and they're picking their favorite, maybe listening to sermons of 10 or 15 online, my goodness, that process can take forever. And many pastor search firms pastor search committees have come out of this and said, we listened to 100 sermons. We went through 100 resumes and we still haven't found anybody. Well, you might be going about it the wrong way. Because pastor search committee people, members of it, are part-time, the process is methodically slow. What else? What else is a reason? The work of a pastor search committee is rarely efficient. The work of a pastor search committee is rarely efficient. I've talked about them being part-time. And I've also talked about going through a stack of resumes being probably not as effective, or even listening to a series of sermons. The work of a pastor search committee is rarely effective. That is why when many people call me, I appreciate them calling me, and sometimes I'll give them a recommendation. We have great network of people at Church Answers, and I love giving them a recommendation if I think that it's a fit. But that is why the recommendation process is often the most effective. So if you are a part of a pastor search committee and you're wondering why you've gone through all these resumes and you haven't been able to find a fit yet, saying, where have all the, I'm doing another where have all the candidates gone that we used to be able to find? Well, you cannot find them in many cases by the same way we used to find them 15, 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. Your pastor search process may not be working because you don't have a denominational network that is effective. You may be counting on submitted resumes, which are often not your best candidates. It may be because you can't put the time into the search committee because you're not full-time doing that, and because many times the work of a pastor search committee is inefficient. Now, at some point, I'll come back, other than saying get recommendations, and I'll talk about some of the characteristics of effective search committees. But for now, this is why you may not be finding a pastor rather quickly. Hope it helps. Maybe gives you some ideas of what not to do so you can have some ideas of what to do. Once again, thank you, Cheney and Associates, for being the sponsor, the total sponsor, the exclusive sponsor of the Church Answers podcast. Remember, they are the accounting firm for the church. Remember, I appreciate you. Right now, subscribe and just let us know that you have this as a part of your ongoing ideas to find out things about ministry. Thank you, all of you listeners, all of you viewers. Thank you for being a part of this. We'll see you in the next episode.